Welcome back, everyone. We are doing episode 3 right now of Goodie and JohnnyMo at the movies.
At the movies.
We are trying to do this week to week. Thankfully, we are on our 3rd week in a row.
And the wives haven't killed us yet.
No. We might be getting to that point, but right now we're still surviving. We're still here. So today's special feature is we are doing The Last Jedi, episode 8.
Star Wars, yep.
So last week was kind of our part 1. And I think some of that might bleed in a little bit to what we're going to discuss tonight. So we actually did do a nice review of just the overall Star Wars universe and saga, I think up to date. So that gave us a pretty good background for everything. And I think now we're going to try to kind of just like get right into the movie a little bit.
Yeah, which is probably one of the main reasons why last week went almost as long as episode 1.
Yeah, we tried getting it down, we honestly did.
It actually went over. We actually edited it.
Yeah, there was a good amount of editing.
We edited it to get it just under the time spent on episode 1. So we promised to do better.
But tonight, before we get started, our traditional drink before we begin.
And you have a?
I have a traditional. I do a nice little wild cherry Pepsi, and this is a Jack Daniel's Fire Whiskey.
I have a nice pint glass full of Bitburger, which is a very, very good German beer. You can get Bitburger from the can or the bottle or on tap, and this one is particularly from a can, which I like. I do not have a Bitburger glass, but I do have a German Hofbrau glass, so that'll do.
So cheers to everyone for watching. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Yep.
Cheers to you,
And
Johnny.
for all you repeat viewers, thanks for coming back. For all you new viewers, feel free to devote 3 hours of your life that you'll never get back on episode 1 and 2.
But it will be well worth it with the information we give you. So we think overall, I think we definitely have mixed reviews when it comes to The Last Jedi. John put it last week really well with episode 7, was that he felt it was a good movie, but not a good episode 7 movie. And is that pretty much right?
I agree. It's it's depending on how you look at it and what you're trying to get out of it. And there are different ways for people to approach this movie, and Disney approached it in a way that I think would have been very different the way George Lucas would have approached it, and I think George Lucas would have approached it, the entire third trilogy, as a whole new story, with things that you never would have anticipated or expected, and you really would have been blown away. And I think it would have been very original and would not have gone over very little familiar ground. There might have been some homages and flashbacks and little things here and there, but overall, I think it would have been a completely unique experience. And Disney didn't go that route. But again, like I said, the measure of success in some circles is, well, how much money did it make? And granted, it made a lot of money. So it was popular, it was successful, but I think it did have a strong proponent of criticisms from various people, and I think those criticisms are founded.
Well, critically, the movie did very well. Critically, it did very well. But amongst fans, I think when you're talking about the criticism, you mean more the fans of
I think
Star
the
Wars,
fans
right?
as well, but you know what? I do remember reading a number of reviews that kind of said, like, yeah, it was fun, but it was there was nothing original in it. It was a lot of stuff that we had seen before. Granted, put together, pretty good, but I think they had the same vein, that it was, and most reviewers, I think, gave it at least 3 stars, maybe more. I don't think too many people gave it less.
Not that I put too much stock in Rotten Tomatoes, but Rotten Tomatoes did give it over a 90%.
Yeah.
Again, I don't put a ton of stock in that, but when a film as big as that, sometimes you kind of do look at that as a little bit of a bar, so to speak, and a little bit of a guide.
Yeah. And I do think a number of reviewers did all kind of echo that sentiment. They didn't necessarily blast it and knock it to the ground like maybe I did, but they, for enough reviewers to say the same thing, there is
merit to that.
There is merit to it.
Absolutely.
It just depends on how far you take that as a negative.
Yep.
And for a hardcore Star Wars fan, I think I take it a little far, but I don't think I'm alone. I think there are other people like that. Just to get into one little sidebar real fast, this is something I think just got edited out of last week. I just wanted to give you a brief introduction of my history with Star Wars, just to say that I was born in 1968, and I was able to see all of the original Star Wars films upon theatrical release, and probably more than once on each occasion. And when I was 9 years old, seeing Star Wars for the first time, I loved it. It blew me away. It was like my favorite film of all time. Until Raiders of the Lost Ark came out a couple years later. There was a big argument between all of our friends. You know, what was better, Star Wars or Raiders? You know, but I was a young kid. You know, even though I had watched a lot of films at that point, I was nowhere near the seasoned film veteran I am today. And when the second trilogy came out, after a long hiatus between the first three movies, I was unbelievably looking forward, and I think the whole world was. I remember going to the movies, paying my $10, whatever, for a ticket to Wing Commander, just to sit in the theater and watch the Star Wars Phantom Menace preview. And as soon as it was over, I left. And I had never done that before or since. And I can tell you right now, it was worth it, because I think the trailer for Phantom Menace is one of the best trailers I've ever seen. It might actually be better than the movie, because it left out. I think so. It had almost nothing annoying about it. There was so much anticipation, and to go into the movies, growing up seeing the original Star Wars movies, and watching that trailer and knowing there was another trilogy coming out by George Lucas, and seeing what was on that screen it was amazing. I think I wound up buying my tickets in advance and seeing it either 7 times or 8 times in a row, in 7 days, 10 days in a row for the whole opening week. Wound up seeing the other 2 films in the trilogy. Turns out Phantom Menace, I think, was my favorite of the, regardless of Jar Jar Binks, Phantom Menace was my favorite. And then it was a matter of time until, and now coming into this trilogy, now that Disney is on board, it's a whole different thing. So I am emotionally invested in Star Wars. It's been an endearing thing to me. I would like to see it done well. When I think it's not done well, I'm going to be vocal about that, and not because I hate it. It's because I'm going to keep it real, and I'm going to criticize it when I feel.
Like I said, I think the whole sentiment of the episode 7 when we did that, and I think even when we discussed today with The Last Jedi, it's that my feeling, like John had last week. John said that it was a good Star Wars film, but it was not a great saga film, a great episode film, and I think that's what we were all hoping for. And I kind of felt the same way for me about The Last Jedi. I walked out of that movie, and I almost didn't know how to feel. I remember I saw it with
I remember you being torn.
And I walked out of that movie, and I was like, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about this movie, and I wasn't like that with The Force Awakens. I walked out of The Force Awakens, and I was excited. I was passionate about Star Wars again, and it's like I couldn't believe we got this film, and now I had to wait a couple of years to see the next one. And I remember walking out of Last Jedi, and I'm just like, am I supposed to like this movie or not? What am I supposed to feel for this? And I was really kind of internally frustrated with my thoughts on that, because I don't even think I felt that with the prequel trilogy. So, Rian Johnson's film was thought-provoking. It was definitely different. I will say one thing about Rian Johnson's film. The Last Jedi takes some risks. And depending on the viewer, some of those risks probably paid off, and some of them probably did not. And I think we are going to really get into that now.
Something we didn't mention at all, I think, last time, and I'm curious what was your opinion of the opening scrolls of, storyline? For episode 7 and episode 8.
Not as strong as the original.
That's what I felt too. I
think that's a really good point.
I felt they were.
So each one they're all broken down into 3 different paragraphs, right? Mm-hmm. And we get the gist. And in episode 7, it discusses pretty much that Luke is gone. Luke is missing, and that the First Order has kind of like reigned supreme, and that the Republic is now using the Resistance to try to battle the First Order. I would probably say that I think they're definitely weaker than the original trilogy, and even, believe it or not, to the prequel trilogy.
The ones from the prequel trilogy were not as good as the original. No,
I think it's just kind of been a step down from the originals to the prequels to the sequels. But I would have liked to have seen. I don't know if it was different. It's not even different wording. Just I guess better pretext.
Yeah, I just felt that it was. I didn't find it to be very interesting and engaging. I found it to just be like, I'm like, okay, whatever. You know,
It's like I'd start the movie.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, you know, you sit there and you watch it, and you know George Lucas didn't write that.
Yeah.
You know, some other banana wrote it, and it's like, you know, someone trying to emulate or imitate the style of the previous ones. And at the end of the day, I just don't think there was enough there in the movie to make those intros, you know, that interesting and gripping. You know, and I think that was a shame. You know, and it talks about how you know the resistance and the First Order, and it just sounds a lot like the rebellion and the Empire.
Empire, yeah.
You know, and I think that's one of the problems I have with the new trilogy is that you know it's like okay they're talking, you know, it's how many years after Return of the Jedi? This is
Supposed to be over like just over like
Okay.
30 years, almost real time, pretty much.
so at the end of Return of the Jedi, you know, the good guys win.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So now it's 30 years later, and the Rebel Alliance is now the
Well, the New Republic. You have it is the Republic,
okay.
but the Republic again does not have an army, so they have once the First Order comes around, now there's the Resistance, and
Right,
so
so
the
you-
Republic has to use the Resistance to fight the First Order.
But well, it made it almost look like the Resistance has been doing exactly what they've been doing for the past
Right.
30 years. They're a ragtag bunch of rebels,
Yeah.
and they're very small, and they're hanging out. And it's like, okay, 30 years ago you won,
Right.
and 30 years later you're still hanging out on these secret bases with like, you know, and I'm like, what did you do for the past 30 years?
Well, it's like the Empire
Does it even
never-
make sense?
Well, it's like the Empire didn't really go away. It kind of cowered. It kind of cowered into an aspect of the galaxy, and now it's trying to push through and show its ugly face again.
with the First Order.
With the
It's
fir-
like, you know,
as the
like,
First
and
Order.
nobody was able to like stop the First Order from building a Death Planet. It's like
no.
they just did all
They
this
were doing
stuff.
that.
And it's like, you know, I feel like it's like these people came out of retirement and they were just hanging out, you know, like a bunch of guys, you know, that just got old at the bar and they, you know, waiting for the glory days when they can go and fight some bad guys. You know, so it's like they didn't go anywhere. It's like they
No.
literally just stayed where they are, got 30 years older,
And then
and
just
they
said,
said,
"Okay,
okay, let's
time-
get,
time to
we
fight
got
again."
like, we got 12 we got 12 X-Wing fighters, let's be careful, we can't afford it anymore.
Well, that's the thing. And this movie discusses at some points the weaponization, like how people are making money off of war, okay, and that this war is going on. But we don't see the war with the Republic. We see the war with the Resistance. And this movie does something that no other Star Wars movie has done in the past, is it literally picks up right after the last film. Every other film is a time jump. You know, whether it's
Sure,
3
oh yeah,
years,
absolutely.
or whether it's a year, or, you know, almost
I
10
actually
years.
never really noticed that. I didn't
Yeah. So
realize
this
that.
movie like literally picks up right after the last film, and I actually thought that was.
Oh, yeah, that's
I
right.
really actually thought that was interesting. That was a different take on it. That was something that was original that had not been done before. I mean, literally, they just blew up Starkiller Base and saved their rebel base of where they were at that point in time, and the rest of the planets that were in the system. So now they're all escaping, they're getting out of there, and all of a sudden here comes the First Order. Like somehow, some way they know where they're located at this point. Well, I guess they found that out in the Force Awakens if they were going to blow up the system. So they hightail it there with the Star Destroyers, and they bring this giant dreadnought, and then you have Poe in his X-wing, basically taking out all the big guns of the dreadnought all by himself. In some ways, I did enjoy that because it kind of just showcases how good of a pilot Poe is, and I did like that. It shows him a little bit of a hotshot and how the whole bombing, all the bombers that start coming in,
Well-
and the bombers start to become, you know, he uses the bombers basically to help to destroy them, but he sacrifices those pilots, and the plan goes.
And a lot of their arsenal too. 'Cause
All the bombers are destroyed. But I almost felt that it was very convenient how easily the bombers were destroyed, and I felt that to me
Well,
that was very frustrating.
3 out of
seeing
4
how-
were very easily destroyed, and the fourth one literally was hanging on for a long time for no good
right
reason.
until it just finally
Yeah.
got shot down. That to me was a little frustrating. I kind of want to say it was bad writing. And plus, why the hell are the bombers so goddamn slow? Seriously, like,
Yeah.
the Y-wings were faster than that back in the day, and always. And by the way, 30-something years later, we still just have X-wings.
You know what? That was something.
We don't have any new fighters.
Yeah.
At least in Rogue One, we get
Yeah.
the U-wing.
That's what I was.
We don't even have any of that.
I did
in
actually
this
make
new one.
a mental notation of that, where I'm sitting and going, I'm like, we're seeing a lot of the same ships and not enough new ships. Because I can tell
I mean,
you right now,
the Star Destroyers had a newer design. They were a little bit updated.
but nothing completely different.
No,
However, the
Dreadnought,
Dreadnought
was different. That was new. And then, of course, well, Snoke's Super Star Destroyer was one of the biggest ships we've ever seen. But again,
we're still seeing,
it's
X-wings
a
and TIE fighters
right.
and stuff, and
although the X-wing, believe it or not, now, and I don't know if you realize this or not, is more closely related to the Ralph McQuarrie concept drawing of the X-wing fighter back from the original trilogy.
Okay.
Ralph McQuarrie being
Which
one of the original concept artists for the film, he came up with a lot of the designs for the ships, the creatures, what the people were going to look like, the planets themselves, and he helped design. He had one of the original X-wing designs. It had been modified a little bit to what we saw in the original trilogy, but this take on the X-wing, there are some differences, especially around the engines themselves and what they look like, that more closely resemble the concept art that Ralph McQuarrie had.
Okay. I think, to draw a comparison to what Lucas did with episodes 1, 2, and 3, I felt that in episodes 1, 2, and 3, there was a large plethora, a multitude of different and new types of ships and stuff.
All the different Naboo starfighters, and even the Naboo
Yeah.
cruisers that they had, all different styled ships.
Like Lucas went out of his way to put different stuff in there, different ideas, and I'm sure there were certain things that, were the same, but like, there was enough new stuff in there to really give it, its own feel and its own look, as opposed to someone like, pretty much watching these first two episodes,
Right.
to sit there and say, wow, I'm pretty much seeing the same type of stuff. And in episode 7, a lot of it takes place on the Millennium Falcon, which is a ship that everybody loves and knows, but it's the same. It's the same ship.
Again, I think it's just bringing back that nostalgia.
Yeah, exactly. As opposed to having these guys doing something different, it's like it's like recreating the feel of running around in space in the Millennium Falcon, and it's like okay, it's like again another safe bet in a long series of safe bets that people are going to look at and say, "Wow, it's great." I'm so happy.
As much as there were safe bets taken in episode 7, I don't think you can say that with episode 8.
Maybe not. Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, I do
more
have things that just going in chronology, maybe a little bit of a chronology of the film. I think I found certain plot points in episode 8 to be really, I don't want to say stupid, just either unbelievable or absurd.
I did find there were, I believe, some repetitive themes from Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi that I found in The Last Jedi.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, going to the end a little bit, like the battle on Hoth is almost
very, very similar.
It's so similar, except, what did they do differently? They
the AT-AT walkers are now these, like, guerrilla walkers.
Yeah, they just made bigger walkers,
right.
And, they made the ice bleed, so, to get a little color, to break up, and I can tell you right now, the reason why they made the ice bleed is for color contrast, it was for decorative purposes. Otherwise, you really look like you're just watching, the fight scene from Hoth with the people in the trenches and shooting back and forth. So they just, they were just doing that to.
But now that we're talking, when you talk about the Resistance and how small they are, it's amazing that when they're all leaving the planet, they're basically just this one cruiser, a couple medical frigates, and that's really it. So, like, that's the entire Resistance.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at, even in Return of the Jedi, they had a much larger fleet than that.
Well, yeah,
so
a bunch of them died of old age in the past 30 years. And apparently they haven't recruited much.
But, I love seeing Admiral Akbar. I thought that was great, seeing him in this film.
See, and that's funny. I never really was a big fan of his character. I thought his character was a little goofy.
Oh no, I liked him. Just like when you talk about George and like the different species and people that were like he made some of these other species intelligent and in charge.
And it was like I felt he was good in Return of the Jedi, and then after that I was like kind of done with him because I don't know I never found him to be too interesting, but he was definitely a different type character.
Yeah, I personally like that he stuck
For me
around.
personally, I was kind of happy when he died in episode 8. I was like, okay, good, I don't have to see him again.
Well, and that to me was kind of I thought that was poorly done to an original character. You take Admiral Akbar and when that TIE fighter shoots, Kylo Ren has the opportunity to basically shoot at the cruiser and take out the bridge, and which he knew that his mother was there. He hesitates, doesn't do it, and then so one of his wingmen takes it out instead, and everybody, all the higher ups in the bridge get sucked out into space. I'm like, that's it for Admiral Akbar. Like, he doesn't go down in flames. He literally gets taken out in the beginning of the film. I thought that was a little weak. In my opinion, I would have liked to have him seen go out another way, which I think I'm going to talk about later, because towards the end of the film, I think there was a better way to have him go out.
Well, that scene, I think, has one of the most absurd moments in the history.
Are we talking about Leia?
Yeah, because Leia gets sucked out, and she doesn't die, and she kind of floats. She comes back to life.
Well, it's the Mary Poppins
and
scene.
floats back to the ship. And I tell you, if you had a colorforms and you just kind of threw an umbrella sticker right over her hand, it's who knew Mary Poppins Returns came out a couple of years ago in episode 8, and you sit there and you go, I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, I'm like, it's Mary Poppins.
I agree with that, but the only thing I actually did enjoy is that we get to see Leia actually use the Force in a very strong way.
In a strong way.
And that to me was the only saving grace about it. It's a silly scene.
Yeah.
I love that they play her theme. That's the Leia theme that they play. But it just shows like Leia is strong with the Force, and I thought that was great because we don't see any of that in The Force Awakens. So to see the only time I think we ever really see her use the Force is when Han dies and she feels it through the Force. That's it.
Yeah.
So to see her kind of use those abilities, I enjoyed that part. I wish it was done in a different way, but I did enjoy seeing her finally use the Force. And then we have...
Well, there's another scene that we were almost at when we were talking before, when they're blowing up the Dreadnought. So the last ship that's that's trying to throw up the Dreadnought, trying to blow up the Dreadnought. It's got this ridiculous scene inside that ship where somebody's unconscious and the girl leaves the post, and winds up falling, and then you got the remote is teetering at the top of this like really, really tall ladder, which is connected to this entire spaceship. It's not just a wooden ladder. It's like metal. It's a metal steel ladder that's built into the wall and everything, and it's about 30, 40, 50 feet away from her at the top, and she's basically kicking the spaceship to shake it so that it falls from where it is down to get her. And I'm sitting there going, are you kidding me? Like, that's your what do you call it, suspenseful moment. Like, this is going to be how this scene plays out, where you have some very injured, hurt woman kicking the spaceship in order to shake it enough to make this thing fall.
I think it would have.
And of course it does, and she saves the day. But it's just like, I'm like, okay, like, to me it was just incredulous. I'm like, come on.
I would have believed it more if the ship had either gotten hit or shook up in some way, shape, or
yeah,
form.
exactly.
That would have knocked it down.
Right.
Rather than her kicking it on her back at the very bottom.
Yeah.
And it just somehow
with almost no leverage on her back.
Right.
As a physical therapist, this must scream insanity. Like, that's physically impossible. It just drives me nuts when like somebody wrote that scene and thought that made sense, that was a good scene, that was a believable, and it would be the crowd would love it. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, who would ever think that? Like,
the only suspenseful part of that is the fact when the remote drops past her and you're watching the remote fall, and then finally you see her hand
she
reaches and grabs it.
Come on.
And of course the bombs dropping down when there's no gravity in space is kind of fun too.
No, I didn't even think of that.
But
we're going to say that they have a propulsion.
I would think there's some type of ion
sort of
propulsion or
propulsion
something pushing it straight down. Of course.
Maybe it's the Force.
I highly doubt that. I don't think anything was anyone. It didn't seem like anyone was Force sensitive really for that one.
Actually, that's one of in episode 7. That's one of my favorite lines when Han Solo says to Finn,
that's not
how the Force works. The Force doesn't work that way.
That's not how the Force works.
And I sit there because I always felt that he was saying that to the people at Disney, because the Disney people are probably writing things and trying to do things with the Force, and somebody's sitting there going, No, that's not how the Force works. You can't make the scene. You can't do the scene that way. You know.
No,
Because I don't think Disney knows how the Force works.
I mean, I think one thing we really didn't talk about last week was probably Han's death and what that meant. But that was one of the best lines in that movie last week. I think one of the mainstays that I truly enjoy about 7 and 8 actually is John Williams still coming back doing his score. I do enjoy that. I like listening to soundtracks. I have them all. I do enjoy the different themes. I enjoy Rey's theme quite a bit in episode 7, and then it comes back even here. The ending of episode 7 that leads us into episode 8 when they're on 8. I don't know if it's pronounced H2 or Octu. When they're on Luke's island for the first Jedi Temple. That theme when she's going up the steps and how they repeat that in this film, and when Rey goes up to meet him. I really did enjoy that. I thought that was a really good melody. It was a good transition from the opening scene after the Resistance escapes to the island, and then we see Luke. Finally, 2 years we're like waiting to see what is going to happen as Rey's handing him the lightsaber.
And what does he do?
Hands the lightsaber to him, and he stares at it and just throws it over his shoulder. And I remember in the theater people laughed at that, and I was pissed. 2 years and that's the scene that we get, and I don't know if that was the reaction that Rian Johnson was looking for. That's what he was like. You know what? He's like, he doesn't need to do anything with it. He's just going to take it and throw over his shoulder because what does he care?
It was an unexpected move.
It was very unexpected. I did not expect. I was really expecting a lot of dialogue, and the fact that there's nothing said, he literally just takes it and chucks it. I honestly would have enjoyed that better if he just took it and then just dropped it right in front of him and then walked away. Because taking it through her shoulder to me it's nonsense.
I remember you telling me about interviews that they had with Mark Hamill over his character.
Yes.
And my recollection was that he, as an actor who is Luke Skywalker, felt that the way that his character was written in Episode 8, because he's really not in Episode 7 except for the last second. Right. All his scenes are really Episode 8. He felt that it was out of character.
Yes.
He didn't necessarily agree with that is how the character would have done things or would have wound up.
He disagreed with the majority of how Luke was written for Episode 8.
But went with it.
Very well known.
It went with it out of respect to the director and the creative team and whatever. And
absolutely. He
could be at the end of the day he just kowtowed to the money and said whatever. I'll do what you want.
I think he did try to buy into Rian Johnson's vision, even though I think it drastically changed how people were going to see his character. I could probably do an entire video just on Luke alone. I think that's. I don't want it to take up too much time talking about that. We could sprinkle that in as we go through it, as we keep talking about the film.
There is one scene with Luke Skywalker that I even think you found disturbing. Is when he's running around the island and he gets
when he gets the milk out.
The milk out of
the creature out there.
With the animal which has the four-breasted mammal. Whatever it is.
I mean, okay, we have a nod to blue milk. Okay, we all know blue milk that was served in Tatooine and the Lars homestead. Okay, yeah.
I just found it to be a disgusting scene that really didn't serve much of a purpose.
No,
except maybe to show where he gets his nourishment.
Exactly.
From. But not for nothing. If I was stuck on that island and that was my source of something besides water every day, I just think it was
unnecessary to show that scene. Like that to me, that's a scene you cut.
Disgusted.
That's a scene that you cut out of the film. Like that doesn't need to be in the film.
And not for nothing. Even the design of the creature I found to be, very unappealing and uninteresting. And again, I think this was one of the criticisms I had with Episode 7 is that I found that the things that are sprinkled in the film, all the different life forms, again to me are uninteresting and generic. This
film, though, does have a lot more variety when it comes to creatures.
It does, but I found that very few of them worked. I
I like the creatures. I like the people that
the little
that-
Furbies.
I like the
little-
the porgs.
The
They're
little
called
porgs,
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, to me, I found that like those were trying to be like comic relief in many
Oh,
cases,
yes.
and I felt that they just looked so fake. They didn't look real, and I felt that like the humor was a little forced and goofy, like they were trying too hard.
I did like the keepers of the temple.
The fish women.
Those people, yeah, like the little people that were like walking around, like taking care of the temple. I did like that.
See, and I thought they were. I don't know. I don't know. They had almost no personality.
But I think that was the point. I think the point of them was just that they're just there to take care of the temple.
You know, and to me, and this reference is probably going to go over a lot of people's head, but it reminded me a lot of the nuns in the famous movie called Black Narcissus from the 40s, where it's a bunch of these nuns running around in like a giant mountain, and I'm sitting there going, I'm like, all right, the nuns in Black Narcissus were 10 times more interesting than these people walking around.
But,
You know, and I didn't care for them too much, and then the other, I think that probably the third. Well, there's two more other animals. I thought the ice foxes on the.
oh, now you're jumping ahead
to. I just wanted to like get the animals out of the way. I found the ice foxes to be they
great.
kind of looked a little interesting, but it was just like, you know,
I kind of like them.
I still thought they were.
I thought they were crystal. I don't think they were ice foxes. I think they were like it was like a crystal fox. Yeah.
They weren't as bad, but I didn't like the animals on the racetrack.
Oh, can't
Like I found those,
Farthiers.
you know, they had like these very wide faces. They just looked very bland and generic. You know, I just don't think whoever's in charge of creating the life, the animal life on episode 7 and 8, like I don't think they really know what they're doing, and they don't do it nearly as well as Lucas did. And I think, you know, a lot of the life forms you saw in episodes 1, 2, and 3, although they were very CGI, I think they looked really good though. And I felt like a lot of these life forms are more proppy looking, like they're not digital of anything. They're actually they look like actual prosthetic props or you know they.
One of the areas they tried to return to the original trilogy was doing real props and real like puppets or creatures and costumes rather than relying so heavily on CGI.
Yeah, I just don't think they did it as well as Lucas would have done.
You just mean creatively?
Yeah, just being creative. I think they gave themselves I think they have less creative people working with a less creative tool because I think you can do so much with the CGI
Right.
that, you know, they kind of limit themselves to these types of scenarios, and unless you're coming out with some really interesting stuff, I think it has the potential to just look very bland, and I think a lot of it did. So I wasn't very excited about that either.
Going back to Luke, the one thing that you and I talked about when we just recently rewatched it, it's interesting how episode 7 ends and episode 8 begins with Luke in his traditional Jedi robes. But almost immediately when we see him in episode 8, he takes the robes off, folds them up, and then gets into his normal like everyday garb that he wears on the planet. You know, later in the film, we find out that Luke has pretty much cut himself off from the Force. So why the hell are you dressing up in your Jedi robes? And this is where I believe there is a huge disconnect between the plot and the course, the overall picture of what this new trilogy was supposed to be. Where last week I talked about J.J. Abrams basically gave Rian Johnson a softball, like, here, I set everything up for you, take it. And Rian Johnson took it and he did something else with it that J.J. Abrams did not think he was going to do. And this is where
I think it suffers from a lack of sole creative vision.
Yes,
Too many.
It's different people with their own visions.
Yes, too many cooks. Well,
There's not a okay. We want to go here for episode 7. We want to go here for 8. And we want to go here for 9. I think there was just too much creative reign, and there wasn't enough collaboration between them. The one thing I remember Rian Johnson asking J.J. Abrams to do when he was still filming was at the end of Force Awakens. He was like, "Can you put R2-D2 on the Falcon?" Because originally it was just going to be Chewie and Rey going to Ahch-To, and it wasn't going to be R2. And obviously they did that because of the one scene on Ahch-To that I actually really love is when Luke goes back onto the Falcon and he takes Han's dice, he sits down at the table, and then all of a sudden R2's there and of course shows him the original message from episode 4. I thought that was a good use of nostalgia.
Right,
to pull at Luke, saying you need to come back with us.
And I mean, I think I looked at that scene as just being like, I don't know, a real easy, cheap nostalgia. Just throw that old video back in there to, kind of jar Luke, but also that kind of jar the audience and bring back that feel of episode 4, the original Star Wars. And again, I just took that as another example of, what it is? You can only cry wolf so many times when it becomes, if it was done sporadically and at the right moments, it would be more effective as opposed to, just another one of these endless nostalgic things.
But Luke sets himself up because he tells R2, like I'm not. There's no way I'm getting off this island. You can't get me to get off this island. Mm-hmm. And then he plays the recording.
Yeah.
And I actually thought that was genius. I will say, I thought that was a great move. That gave me chills watching that one scene when that happens and you see Carrie Fisher at such a young age again doing that role. I did enjoy that.
One of the things that I think is very lost upon the Disney people is the role of R2-D2 and C-3PO in the overall story structure, because if there is a rationale to look at all of the previous films, and basically state that it is the story.
Oh, it's told through them.
It's the story of R2-D2 and C-3PO. They have pivotal roles in every single film.
Yep.
And they're like almost almost like the behind the scenes glue that kind of ties everything together. It really is, to me it really can be interpreted as a story about them. And I think if Lucas was in charge of episode 7, 8, 9, he would have continued with that, where they would have been pivotal roles. And now I felt like in these movies that they were just, for the most part, not entirely, but for the most part, they were just kind of there because, well, you got to have a movie with them. But the other, BB-8 was going to take over.
Well, the big hint is the opening words to every Star Wars movie, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. That means these are stories that are being told. And the stories that are being told, it has always really been understood that it's been the droids that are telling the story. Return of the Jedi, it's C-3PO who's telling the story. Mm-hmm. So, droids can pretty much go on forever, and they're gonna outlive the humans. They're gonna outlive all of their masters. So, these are the stories that they tell over the years. So to me, it's like a recall from those droids telling their experience over the time.
And I'm sure
the only part that R2 really plays in episode 7 is at the very end when he has the full map. Yeah, and not a lot of people know this.
He finally wakes up and does a little bit. Yeah.
But he gets that from episode 4 when he's in the Death Star. When he's basically finding out where Princess Leia is. Mm-hmm. He basically supposedly, this is the behind the scenes thing, is that he downloads a lot of the information from the Empire in that scene. And that's basically the star map.
Where he got it from.
So, he has access to that. So when BB-8 finally gets that little piece, put everything together.
I just think it's a lost opportunity because I'm sure, if Lucas, even if he had given a hint of his designs for where things were going, I think, they would have had a more prominent role. And I could see, the people at Disney going, well, we're going to do something different. We're going to have them because we want people to see them.
Right.
But they're not going to be woven into the story as closely as they were in all 6 previous episodes.
I would have liked to have seen them in a more pivotal role. Not pivotal, but just more upfront. It's a shame that they were kind of pushed to the back so much. R2 is barely in episode 7, so is 3PO, and then even this one. Nice to see 3PO actually all gold. With the exception of episode 3, that's the only time we ever see him.
I thought he had a red arm.
That was in episode 7.
Yeah.
But in episode 8, he's actually he's all fixed and he's got all gold. So that was actually nice to see.
Yeah, so I'm a little upset about how.
But the new droid is BB-8.
I like BB-8, but it's like Disney was trying to create a new cool droid.
Yes.
And
no, it's a new action figure. It's a new toy. It's something to sell.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a shame that it was done at the expense of what I think would have been a more interesting finale to the lives of R2-D2 and C-3PO, because I just feel that in episode 9 they're really not going to have too much of a pivotal role, and they're just going to be part part of the
I
end.
know, they're going to be part of the side. They're going to be part of the side crew, unfortunately.
Yeah, they're going to be on the sidelines, either cheering and not have had an important part, like almost a fruition
Right.
of their life. And that's I think that's just Disney, saying well we didn't want to go in that direction.
Right.
Well, that's too bad because that's where it probably would have gone, and I think that's where a lot of fans would have liked to see it go.
If we go now to the First Order kind of chasing down the Resistance in space, one of the longest space chases I think in movie history that we've had to kind of deal with.
In terms of time.
In terms of just everything, it's a long, dragged out race. Basically, it's basically waiting for the Resistance to run out of fuel, pretty much. So now we have Rose and Finn meet up, and now they basically figure out what they need to do. They're telling Poe their plan because Poe's been X'd out because Vice Admiral Holdo does not want to be involved in talking to Poe and letting him in on what's going on. And John and I had a good discussion about this back and forth last night about...
We're actually like almost polar opposites on this.
We are. And John believes that Holdo is absolutely right to not tell Poe anything because he lost that battle. He lost all the bombers. Because of him, they lost their bombers.
Yeah.
And that's true. But my counter argument to that was, I still don't think Leia was actually demoting him. I think that was more or less a joke that she was yelling to him, like, you're an idiot, we lost all these bombers because of you, I need you to be a leader, I need you to be better than that, you need to make better decisions. And she even says, when Poe says, like, there were heroes that died there, she says, yeah, heroes, no leaders, and she's looking at him, expecting him to step up and be the leader. Yeah. And the fact that Poe, the day before, literally helped destroy the Starkiller base, and is still literally known as the best pilot in the Resistance. So the fact that Holdo has to know that Poe is basically Leia's right-hand man as a command, whether he's a commander or even a captain. Yeah, he screwed up, he made a mistake. But you don't succeed by withholding information from some of your higher-ranking officers. No, in our assumption, there is nobody else on that capital ship that knows what the plan is, other than Holdo and Leia.
Yeah.
Right?
Could be.
I mean, because was there anybody else on that ship that was stepping up when Poe was making his case, saying to Holdo, like, what is the plan? Like, I just want to know what's going on. And no one stepping up saying, don't worry, she's got this.
Right. Well, I think
it's basically, he's just supposed to follow her blindly.
And I think, so she's like, whatever, is she an admiral or a general?
She's a vice admiral.
She's a vice admiral. So you got this woman who's in charge. She shows up on the ship, and, she's going to deal with Leia, who she is very much, they're very
seems like she's close with.
Come very close with. And you got Poe, who is, a kind of hot-headed pilot who just recently got in trouble, and in my opinion, he was demoted and basically temporarily lost his seat at the table. But he wants to be there and know what's going on, and she identifies him as, you're a hot-headed pilot, impulsive, and we don't need that right now. She's got a plan, and she basically just tells him, I need you to follow orders and stop being a pain in the ass. And, at no point does he do that. And he, to even go to the point where, like, how do you justify his mutiny? His mutiny is based on the fact that, predominantly, that he just doesn't know exactly what she's doing. I don't know that he knows enough about what she's doing to say that it's not going to work.
Well, I think there's a couple problems there. One, it's easily solved by if she just tells him what the plan is. Like, what is the big secret about? We're trying to reach the planet Crate, and we have stealth capabilities.
See, and I sit there and say it's not that it's a secret. It's just that like she doesn't have to answer to him. She just needs him to follow orders and not be a pain.
But while that's
okay with that.
But while that's true, like she also knows like he is one of the best pilots that they have, and he is also like one of the people that Leia trusted. And not to mention later in the film when Poe's knocked out after Leia knocks him out with the blaster. He's on the gurney, and they're bringing him onto the spaceship. Holdo even says, it's like what does she say? Like she says something about him being like, not him being a hothead, not him being even like
towards the end. Oh, she says she likes him,
but she says like, I really like him. It's like, well, then why didn't you freaking tell him what was going on?
And I think it's one of those things where it's like, what, I felt that I don't know. It's just see all the scenes ring to me that I'd sit there and I go. I keep going to the advice admiral like stick to your guns and Poe needs to shut the hell up.
But Poe
You know,
also was trying to protect everybody. Poe's primary concern was the resistance and the people on that ship, as was Holdo's.
Right.
But you can see, but Holdo can see Poe at one point basically saying, he's like, telling everyone like, this is all we have, and you're going to put these people on these ships that have no shields, have no weapons whatsoever. He says the First Order's going to destroy us. It's like, this is it. This is the resistance right now. Like if this is gone, the resistance is over.
I think I just felt that he had no faith in his leaders, in what he had no faith in her, and he wasn't going to take no for an answer. And I think she decided like she doesn't have to give him the information. You know, in the chain of command,
But
you
I also
follow
think-
orders.
But to me, like
And
it was only written
it's-
that way
it's-
to create conflict. Because in
Well, yeah.
reality, in the real military strategic discussions, like that wouldn't happen. Like you're not like the general's not going to keep the information from one of the higher ranking officers when it comes to succeeding in a mission. He's going to inform that person so that they can help carry out the plan, knowing what the plan's going to be. It would be different if, like, it's one thing if you were going to tell, like, an infantry soldier that can't be trusted. Like, you're telling one of your higher ranking officers on the ship, this is what our plan is.
But I think it was at a point where he was very impulsive and hot-headed and had just made a very brash, wrong decision.
But what was he going to do?
But he even disobeyed Leia's order. You know, he disobeyed an order,
No, he did.
a direct order that, in retrospect, I think
Well, it cost
Leia was more correct. You know, so they lost more percentage-wise. They lost more of their force.
But you don't think if they did not take out that dreadnought, they still would have caught up to them, tagged them through hyperspace, and then the dreadnought would have been right there attacking them. And the dreadnought's guns were more powerful than what was on those Star Destroyers.
Yeah, that's true too.
So that could have
But at no
taken
point
it
did I
down.
feel that Leia felt that he was right after all.
I don't think Poe.
Yeah.
I don't think Poe was ready to make that decision. Obviously, with the casualties that they ended up having.
Yeah.
But it sets up the chain reaction. But it also this is Poe's path. This is Poe's growth.
Yeah.
Poe is being pushed to be the leader at some point in time, and Leia knows this, and basically Poe is trying to. The whole arc of this is Poe seeing the error of his ways by the end, which is what he does on Crate, and he decides to pull away and not risk the rest of the fighters going up against that battering ram, cannon that they had.
Right.
So he calls everybody back, and you can see obviously he finally learns his lesson.
Well, it was interesting watching, them breaking through the door on the ship, and it turns out to be Leia breaking
Yes,
in.
I thought that was
and
ironic.
then, Poe was like, oh.
Wasn't
and,
expecting
and,
that.
Yeah, and she just
shoots
stuns him. It's like, and I felt that like vindication. She was like, like, Poe, cut the shit.
Yeah, calm down.
You're wrecking everything. And, and incidentally, as it turns out, and this, now we're going in another direction, the whole side trip that Rose and Finn go on.
This is I think a good discussion, because if we're going to talk
Yeah.
about Rose and Finn, I liked Finn a lot in episode 7, and I think they completely wasted him in episode 8. Rose was a good introduction. Her sister was the pilot that was on the last bomber that drops them on the dreadnought, so she dies. So Rose is kind of very emotional when she first meets Finn. She knows that he's one of the heroes of the Resistance at this point. But she sees him trying to escape, she stuns him. Mm-hmm. I would have rather have seen the two of them, because Rose figures out how they're tracking them, and Finn is basically like, I can get you in there. Mm-hmm. Like, right. I know where you're talking about. I know that location. We can get in there, and you can disable it. I think it would have made for a better story if the two of them would have figured out a way to get onto the ship, and if we would have followed them throughout the ship, trying to sneak their way into that whole area, rather than doing Canto Bight.
Right, because ultimately what they did was they just created this whole subplot,
which leads nowhere. The result of all of that
is actually death and destruction on
Yes.
the side of the good guys. It's like, it actually backfires. So I think it was just, the way they're sitting there, they're going, we got to have a change of scenery.
Yes.
So how do we do that?
Space race.
So the change of scenery, on top of the back and forth between Luke's planet and the space chase, it's like, okay, there's got to be another place to go to it. So they wind up going to this Canto Bight, to this, in my opinion, a very uninteresting casino. I didn't find the casino to be very original or.
I didn't mind the casino part. I thought they had some really cool looking like aliens, and you just see how the other side lives. Like this is like the wealthiest of the wealthy at this place, and that part I didn't mind so much. I just think the storyline to bring that in was completely unnecessary. Yeah. Like you didn't need to go there.
And then who are they after? They're after the Master Codebreaker, which is to me an idiotic name.
I'm sorry, I was just lazy.
And at the end of the day,
you don't even get that.
They don't find. Well, they find him, but they don't get him.
You don't get him.
They don't get the Master Codebreaker, and they get wind up. They get
Toro.
Thrown in jail, and lo and behold, in the same cell as them happens to be someone who can accomplish what, according to
Maz Kanata.
Maz, I'm never going to get these names out. According to Maz, is the only person who can do this, but. There is apparently somebody else, and it happens to be in the game.
But I think that too.
To me, that was ridiculous.
But this was also a waste of Maz. Like Maz was such an interesting character in episode 7. Did you think Maz was interesting? Like with everything that she kind of knew, like in her past from episode 7.
I thought she was okay. I thought she was okay.
I would have liked to have seen more of her in this one. Like what she was doing in the hologram. She had a jetpack on. She had a blaster. She was shooting people around. Why couldn't she have helped out? That to me should have happened with Finn and with Rose on the Star Destroyer. Like that somehow Maz should have made it to the Resistance to cloak them or whatever they needed to do to get onto the Star Destroyer to help destroy it at that point. And the three of them could have had their own journey. That to me I think would have been a very interesting story, a side story, rather than going to Canto Bight and accomplishing nothing.
Right, and having this ridiculous scene where they're all running around on these animals. That
and on the father ears that are basically these track animals that they're running around.
They're apparently strong enough to just jump through buildings and.
Well, they were pretty big.
But they were like taken down like.
They took that building, but they went through the glass, and they basically were just destroying.
I thought they were going through the walls too. It was like they had this whole stampede, and it's like a big feel good, exciting moment. But it just doesn't make any sense. It's like, you know what? You guys are supposed to be saving the day, and you're worried about freeing the animals,
right?
And to me, it's
you're on the clock.
Yeah, you're on the clock.
You're like the fuel's going to run out soon.
It's all these feel good moments. That people can be like, oh, and it's like well. They're at war, so to me it's just like that Disney touch, and again you have all these characters in episode 8 that I think they also did in episode 7 where it's like I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but it's like I feel like they.
I want to talk about Rey and Kylo Ren and their connection.
Now, just for the record, I actually really like the Rey character. I like her in episode 7. I like her in 8.
Rey's my favorite character.
I think she's the best character in the whole thing.
In this sequel trilogy. Yeah.
I like her performance. I like the nuance she gives to the character.
Daisy Ridley is. This is her.
And I like her story.
This is her big role. Right?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
I don't know anything that she's in.
But this is what I'm defining her from these two roles. Really, really enjoy her. In both films, and the conflict that she has, she's trying to bring back Luke. This is her whole goal, is going to H2 or Octu and getting Luke to try to come and help fight the First Order and take down Snoke, and to at this point now she's starting to feel, now she's having this connection with Kylo Ren that she almost feels that he could possibly even be turned, and she's talking to Luke about this, and Luke's like, no, it's not going to go the way that you think. The one thing I enjoy that Luke finally decides to try to train her, and we get to see this.
I thought the training was actually kind of fun.
The training I thought was fun. Just the fact that
I enjoyed those.
It's someone who you're taking this girl who knows nothing really about the Force other than what she's heard in myth, and literally when Luke tells her to sit down and to reach out with the Force, what does she do? She reaches out with her hand. I thought that was great. Because she takes it so literally, and then Luke finally starts to show her a little bit the way.
Well, first he tickles her.
And he tickles her
with the frond,
with the little leaf.
And I actually thought that was actually kind of funny. That to me was one of the humorous parts that worked, and I think you can attribute that to Mark Hamill's handling of the scene,
Yes.
because I think he knew how to pull it off and make it
Yes.
work, as opposed to a forced joke.
Right.
So I actually found that kind of.
But his time in solitude and the philosophy that he goes into with this was interesting, because it's he talks about the vanity of the Jedi, and how to think that if the Jedi are gone, that the Force will disappear. That's the vanity that the Jedi have had, and that the Force it's in all living things. So at some point, like, there are going to be people that come along that have the ability to use the Force.
No mention of midi-chlorians.
No, they kept that. I think they kept that out,
Which was actually good, because that was dumb.
But I truly felt that that Luke was in some ways like trying to really teach Rey to a degree, but Rey showing him how wrong he is and being in this isolation. Luke goes on and on about how it was the Jedi that helped create Darth Vader and basically help Darth Sidious rise to power, because they were blind to him, and they let him destroy the Jedi, and that the Empire took over from that, and how Darth Vader was created. But then Rey basically just goes and tells him, but it was a Jedi that made Darth Vader turn back to the light.
Right.
And of course, that's Luke.
Which is the shining moment of Return of the Jedi.
Which is the shining moment of Return of the Jedi, and the fact that that's where Luke starts to become a legend. And it's what happens after Return of the Jedi in the books, in the expanded universe, which is no longer canon, unfortunately, is very, very different from what we get in The Last Jedi. And everybody had a different thought about where this movie was going to go. And I really did not want to see Luke this. He almost seems like just so far gone that he's basically given up. And that's what he says, like, I've come to this island to die. And it's just, when you see how did 30 plus years go by and this is where your character is?
Yeah.
Like, you get the flashbacks of him and Kylo Ren, and how he had that moment of weakness, and that he failed, and he almost struck down his own nephew. I don't know. I know Rian Johnson wrote it that way. I don't know if Luke would have done that. That was his nephew. That was his sister's kid. I honestly still think, like, how does he not have a conversation with Leia and Han about what he's feeling, what's happening to their son and to his nephew? Like, how does he not have that conversation with them first before he goes and does what he does?
Yeah. And I think that maybe is part of what, like, Mark Hamill was saying, like, this is not how
I agree.
How it would have.
I don't think it would. He's like, I don't think it would have went down this way. Like, he's like, I don't like. Luke was one of the. He even says in one of his interviews that Luke was one of the most hopeful people in that original trilogy. And how do you go from that to this? And I don't think Rian Johnson really showed me enough that made me believe that this would happen. After Luke fails, I could see him retreating to the island to try to research more about the origins of the Force, and maybe even about the Sith, even though Snoke and Kylo Ren are not considered Sith.
Yes, I would say yes.
Snoke is not considered a Sith Lord, so...
Well, it's really funny about Snoke. I feel that Snoke is just there, and they don't tell you much about him.
No, but people will go on and on about how Return of the Jedi, like, you don't really know anything about the Emperor too, and the Emperor dies. But this was different.
Yeah, but you know what? But you find out about the Emperor.
Right, but we didn't know that was going to happen. We didn't know episode 1, 2, and 3 were going to come.
But I think.
But people were comparing. The people that were complaining that Snoke, we learned nothing about Snoke. Snoke just dies in this movie. And the people that are saying that this was such a great thing were like, well, we didn't know anything about the Emperor, and the Emperor died too. It's like, but it's different because 7 sets up Snoke to be this all powerful being that can use the Force, that can use the dark side, and he's controlling Kylo Ren, and he's the head of the First Order. And all of a sudden, here we are, and he has some really good scenes in this movie. Mm-hmm. He force chokes General Hux through hologram, and he's not even physically there, and he chokes him. I thought that was genius. He bridges both Kylo Ren and Rey together. He bridges their minds so that they can connect and speak to one another. Mm-hmm. Even when he's on that Super Star Destroyer of him and Kylo Ren, he takes Kylo Ren down in a second. Kylo Ren stands up like he's going to be combative to him, and he basically shuts him right down.
I mean, he is a strong character. I mean, to me, he does actually remind me a little bit like of the Emperor.
Very much of the Emperor.
He's
Very
just
much
like
so.
he's just a slightly larger frame.
Yes,
and
he's got scoliosis.
and
He's got that disfigured head. He's leaning over. He's leaning over to the right like this the entire time.
You know, and yeah, I mean, he's just distorted looking.
But I just feel he was so easily defeated.
Yeah, and again, like, you know, like you say, well, I mean, we didn't know about the Emperor in episode 4, 5, and 6, but eventually we found out about him. We don't know about Snoke.
I don't think we're going to find that.
We're never going to find out about it.
See,
you know? There is no backstory that Disney. You know,
I think you are going to be right. Where I don't think
They're
we're
never
going to
gonna
find out much about Snoke.
Yeah.
I think this whole movie is going to be about Kylo Ren. I'm hoping we get the Knights of Ren in this movie, which were hinted at in episode 7. Because now that we're going back to JJ, I was really hoping there was a story at one point that they were looking to film a scene with the Knights of Ren charging on Ahch-To, and Rey and Luke were going to have to fight them. And that never happened, or unfortunately, but like that would have been an incredible scene. Like that to me would have been great to see that if that would have been the driving force to get Luke out of his funk.
So yeah, so Snoke.
That throne room scene is one of the better scenes.
Okay. So Snoke, to me, Snoke is really just a visual villain with no history or depth alluded to, and they never will.
He's just there.
You know, he's just there to fulfill that role of the big dark side bad guy.
Right.
And he's really not that far removed from the Emperor. So again, I found him to be, I didn't find him to be that interesting. But one of the part, and you alluded to this just a little while ago, the communication between Kylo Ren and Rey, those scenes and those interactions and scenarios, I actually found those to be very interesting. And there was one part in the movie where it hit me completely unexpected, and I was like, wow, they're finally going to take a chance and go somewhere that I was not expecting them to, but they eventually reversed course. But the scene where, you know, Kylo Ren killed Snoke, and now you have Kylo Ren and
visually that was one of the best.
And Rey fighting
side
together,
by side.
And I'm sitting there going like, oh my God, like.
But
it just opened the door for a direction you weren't expecting, and ultimately they didn't go that direction. They split up, and I was just like, oh, they had an opportunity to. I couldn't believe they were going to do something that unexpected and go and then but they backed
This
down.
movie changes Kylo Ren for me a little bit, because in episode 7, at the end of it, he's kind of like this. You know, he has those temper tantrums. He's kind of like this whiny 30-year-old guy
Darth Vader wannabe.
Who's like basically not. Yeah, he wants to be his grandfather for some strange reason. I guess he didn't learn the lesson from Darth Vader's mistakes. So he's trying to be this person and failing along the way. And now all of a sudden in 8, he kills his master. He kills Snoke. As soon as he kills Snoke, that is a game changer.
Yeah.
That changes Kylo Ren's status at that point in time. And I'm not just talking about now he's the master. I'm talking about what Kylo Ren is capable of doing. Because now he defied his master, he killed him. Now he's in control. But yet you still see that bit of rage, and he's not able to get it all together, especially when they're on Crate and he sees the Falcon and he's yelling at them to shoot that plane, shoot that fighter down. And then when he sees Luke and he's like, I want every shot, every all guns pointed at him, shoot at that one person. You see that he still can't rein it in.
Yeah,
he still loses control.
He's still a loose cannon.
Exactly. But what he is capable of at this point, I think, is very, very different now.
Well, I mean, okay,
that opens the door for 9.
So, before I talk about going to Darth Vader, there are 2 lines in the film where, like, I'm sure there were like all these nostalgic moments. Everybody's going, like, oh, and I'm sitting there going, like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I've heard this before. So there's one line where they talk about, you know, where your training is complete or your training is almost complete.
Snoke says this.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay. I've heard the Emperor say that.
Yes.
Yeah. And then there's the line where, Kylo Ren extends his hand to Rey and he's like, join me. And together we'll, and I'm like, are you kidding me?
Well, from all the people that said how this movie was so original, I'm like, no,
that's
it's
exactly
not.
what Darth Vader says.
Right.
And I'm like,
as much
you're
as
stealing lines and wrapping them in nostalgia
Listen,
for a feel-good moment, and it's just like, come on, say something else already.
as much as Episode 7 was an homage to Episode 4, this film is Episode 5 and 6 wrapped into one.
Oh yeah, I'm
And,
just like, oh my god.
Like, granted, this movie takes Star Wars into a different direction in a lot of areas. Some of them I don't mind, and others I kind of cringe at.
So now you got Episode 9 coming. Okay, so Han Solo's dead.
Before we get to that, let's get to that in a sec. But so now let's get to, before we get to Crate, the rebels, the rebels, the Resistance. The only way that they get away is General Holdo takes their last cruiser, turns it around, and goes into hyperspace and wrecks basically the First Order's whole fleet. It doesn't take out the Super Star Destroyer, that's still around, but all the other Star Destroyers that are with it are basically destroyed.
That was a great scene.
A fantastic
Might
scene.
be my favorite, one of my favorite.
Beautifully shot. The no sound at first when that happens,
Yeah.
when they're hyperspace, I thought that was great. A couple things. One, now, that can be done now at any point in time, okay, when someone's in trouble. I'm just going to shoot my giant ship into the fleet, into hyperspace.
Well, it's a suicide mission.
Right, but why couldn't you have a droid use one of the medical frigates? Before one of those medical frigates, they had multiple frigates along with the giant cruiser. Why not, before that frigate went down, you turn that thing around and shoot it into hyperspace? They could have done that. They could have had a droid do it. Why not? And this is where, to me...
I don't know that was their plan. I think it worked out that way.
But my whole point was, now at this point in time, so she thought of that at the last second,
Yes.
saying, I'm going to shoot this thing into hyperspace.
I think she was...
Why not?
I think necessity became the mother of invention, because that was not part of her plan.
But to me, that's
her
where...
plan was to lead them away.
My other point with
And
this
she
is...
was just going to be on the ship that ran out of gas.
This is where you have Admiral Akbar. Admiral Akbar should have been the one to take the ship into hyperspace to destroy those ships into that fleet.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been the way to take him out, for him to die honorably, not to get shot out and pulled out into the vacuum of space. That to me was where I think they really screwed up. Where Rian Johnson did, he should have had Akbar do it, because you could have had him go out honorably. And I'm really upset that they didn't take that. Route.
Now, I think Laura Dern's character, I almost, when I first saw her, I just felt that she was a little miscast. I didn't feel her portrayal of a Vice Admiral.
I've heard that from a lot of people.
I was like, she just didn't fit. But towards the end,
yes,
she grew on me more. But to me, it was not a no-brainer.
Well, to me, in the beginning, she was more annoying because of how she was treating Poe. But as it went on, especially towards the end, I started to enjoy the character a little bit more.
Yeah, so I think she grew on me towards the end, and how she went out, to me, was like a real bold move. I enjoyed the visual of how they did that scene.
Yeah, real quick, going to back to Ahch-To for the last time. I love that they used a real puppet for Yoda. And that puppet was...
Yeah, I was going to ask you about how you felt about Yoda.
That was a real puppet, and that was the exact cast molding that they used for The Empire Strikes Back. They actually found the original molds and were able to recreate the puppet. That was really Frank Oz that did that.
See, I
enjoyed that scene.
I thought his face looked a little weird. His face looked a little odd. It almost felt like it was frozen in a certain way, and like it just, to me, it looked a lot. But yeah, I was sitting on. I mean, it was definitely a puppet, and it was you didn't get like the look that you got from episode
CGI.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that was one of my. There's the talk that Yoda and Luke has about failure and how that's one of our best teachers. I actually really enjoyed that scene. I don't understand why Yoda didn't come to Luke a decade earlier or like years earlier after it happened and be like, hey, listen, failure is a part of all this, a part of teaching. you need to kind of move past all that and learn from it. I would have really liked to have, to me it would have made more sense if that would have happened much earlier on. But I was happy to see Yoda. I thought that was great. So now we get to Crate. We get to the final scene where we finally get to see, no one comes. The Resistance reaches out to all across space,
that I found to be very annoying.
And nobody shows up.
Are you kidding me?
No Lando. Like Lando's not coming.
Nobody showed up.
No one from the past.
Because they even presented it like, Princess,
they have allies
Princess
in the outer
Leia.
realm.
Princess Leia has a lot of weight, and she sent it out on her secret personal. And
she has
nobody showed up. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah.
I was like, really?
So now all of a sudden you finally have Luke come. So that line that Luke gives, like, you want me to come out there with my laser sword and take on the entire First Order? Well,
that's what he did.
That's exactly what he does. he come and this is one of the scenes that I actually really do enjoy, because I think it is one of the greatest scenes we have, and of the use of a Force ability. Because I don't think too many people really saw that coming, that he was Force projecting himself.
No, I didn't see that.
I don't think really a lot of people end up seeing that. And they give it away. Rian Johnson gives it away when Kylo Ren slides when they're fighting, and all of a sudden you see his foot create that red mark in the salt. And then when Luke turns and does that, his feet do nothing.
Do nothing.
And it's almost like, well, you don't even think about that. He's just pivoting on his feet. But then you see when he strikes through him, and then Luke just turns around, and he's like, I'm still here.
Well, interesting enough, when Luke Skywalker is in the base before he goes out there is a scene where he grasps Leia's hand.
He takes her hand, and he even gives her Han's dice,
Yeah.
which also disappear when Kylo Ren grabs it in the base. The dice disappear, and that's
Yeah.
after Luke passes.
Because it is a projection.
It is a projection. Now, the only thing I wonder is, did Leia know it was a Force projection? Because Leia's Force sensitive. I think she would have felt if her brother was actually there or not. Mm-hmm. I think another missed opportunity is, why the hell is Luke carrying his original lightsaber in this scene? One, Kylo knows it was destroyed because he was there when it got destroyed with Rey. Luke should have had his Return of the Jedi lightsaber with him. That's also my favorite hilt and lightsaber, so that's why I'm saying that. But I also think that would have made a lot more sense if that was the lightsaber he was carrying.
One other illogical thing that happened on that planet. So the good guy ships, the Alliance, they're flying out to meet the AT-ATs.
Yeah, the giant.
So Finn, Rose takes out Finn's ship, and they crash.
Oh yeah, you hate this scene. Yeah,
and one of my most
hate this
annoying
line.
lines in I think in the history of film is basically Rose sitting there basically saying, we're not going to win this war by killing the people we hate. We're going to win it by saving the people we love. And I'm just like, oh, give me a break.
But it's not her.
But
it's
anyhow,
the line.
right?
It's not. It's like that's the thing. Like I like Rose, but that was a terrible line.
It's a terrible line. It's like,
Yeah.
come on, she goes unconscious.
Right, and she passes
And
out. Yeah,
Finn
drags her back.
drags her back.
Yep.
Okay, in record time. That entire distance that it took them to fly in these ships, they're going straight out. They went really far.
Well, you got to remember that they're all taking their eyes off of Finn because Luke's now out there. So everyone's now focusing on Luke. They're not focusing on Finn.
But I mean, he's
fast.
He's dragging someone on like a piece of metal, and he's kind of hurt too.
Yeah.
I'm like, what was he running? The Iditarod? Did he have a bobsled? I'm sitting there like, he comes back. He's like, oh, we made it back, and I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, it took you faster to run back
Than
it took to fly there in your ship, and I'm like, okay, we'll just
suspend belief.
There is a certain suspension of time belief in almost all films, because again, same thing. Like you look at I think episode 7 where they're counting down the time that it's going to take for the Star Killer to charge up and destroy the planet, and it's like we got 15 minutes,
Right.
and it's like. They're standing on the hill, looking at where they gotta run across and climb up this ladder and do everything inside and get out. And it's just like, I'm like, you know,
Exactly.
things take time.
Yeah, I know.
You know how fast 15 minutes goes?
The ending of the film with Kylo realizing that it's not Luke, that he's not there, I thought that was great. And then Luke's line to him, "See you around, kid." You know, and especially before that, he even says, you know, "If you strike me down, I'll basically he was like, you know, I'll always be there, just like your father."
You're right.
And that's one of the only mentions of Han in this movie, other than in the very beginning when Luke realizes that Han's not there on the Falcon with Chewie and with Rey. So, you know, Han's gone, and of course now, I knew going into this trilogy that Luke and possibly the other characters were going to pass away at some point in this film and pass the torch on to the younger generation.
Yeah, see, I didn't really know that, but
I didn't think Luke was going to pass away in this film.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to somehow sacrifice himself in the end. You know, after I'm watching 7, I'm thinking to myself, okay, Luke's going to fight Snoke, Rey's going to take out Kylo Ren. That was my whole thought on this, and that Luke will probably sacrifice himself or get wounded in some way that he's not going to be able to go on after Episode 9, and then become the Force Ghost then. So obviously it seems like we're going to get Luke as a Force Ghost in Episode 9.
right. So I mean, but ultimately, like, Luke is gone, Han Solo's gone,
Yep.
and
And-
although the Leia character is not gone,
Right.
Carrie Fisher died.
So, well, they are
So-
using, but you know what they're doing, right? They're using unused footage from Episode 7 and Episode 8 that was filmed with using Carrie Fisher, and they're going to somehow integrate that into the story for Episode 9.
So
Carrie
Princess
Fisher
Leia
is going to live on.
is in Episode 9. Okay.
They're not saying exactly how they're using it or what they're doing yet, but they are going to be putting her in. She's the last of the original 3, character-wise, that's still alive, so they have to use her. But obviously, we are going to see Mark Hamill as Luke, as a Force Ghost, and I think we need to, like, Luke to me still has to pass on the torch to Rey to help continue the training in some degree.
So I think it's going to be a lot of. I mean, to me, I think Rey is the focal point of the
Absolutely.
whole trilogy. So
Yep.
it's going to be.
But I like that
what happened. How is her character going to come to fruition?
Absolutely.
At the end of episode?
But and I like the kind of, like, you know, the little bit we got, like, you know, do we got a little love triangle going on between, you know, is it Rey and Finn, or is it Rey and Poe? Is it Finn and Rose?
Or is it all 3 of them?
You know, and, yeah. I don't know if that works out so much in the Star Wars world, but you know, I did like that meeting at the end between Rey and Poe, because you almost, like, don't even realize that these two have never really met before that.
Rey and Poe.
Yeah, that's like the first time that they actually meet. Is at the
Oh
end.
yeah. Okay. Right.
So seeing that, but
So
I mean,
when is Episode 9 slated to come out?
the middle of December this year. So
Oh,
we've got
so
a lot of
it's this year, so
speculation.
it's coming.
I think
So-
a video that John and I will probably do is maybe some speculation as to what we would like to see maybe in Episode 9 happen before that occurs. I mean, overall, like I said, I think this was a good Star Wars film. I do not think this was a good saga film. I heard in a Collider video once that if you take out the main character names, the names that we've grown to love, like Luke, Leia, and you just introduced other names, the movie feels different. But I think because of the stakes with the original characters and what happens to them, I think that takes on a different meaning, and I actually do agree with that. You know, if it wasn't Luke and if it was someone else, I don't think I would have cared as much. But because
The
it
movie
was,
wouldn't have held up as much.
it was because I grew up loving Luke, and he was my favorite character from the original trilogy, as was for a lot of other people. Seeing the change in his character and what occurred from Return of the Jedi to now, that's a big deal to me and to a lot of other people. I mean, Luke was my hero, and I see what he turns into, and I didn't see it going that way. And it's not that it has to be my vision. I'm not saying that.
Right.
I'm saying that you could have done a better job writing one of the classic heroes of our time.
Right.
Fictional heroes. And I think that was just, to me, that was poorly done. All right. Rian Johnson has a trilogy that he's supposed to be putting out all by himself for Star Wars. That's going to be completely separate from the saga films. You know, I'll be interested to see what he comes up with for that. I do think there were some really incredible visual shots with this. I think Rian Johnson took a lot of risks. Like I said before, I think some of them worked and some of them didn't for me. But that was just me personally. watching the movie last night, there was definitely some things that rewatching it, I really enjoyed. Like I said, I love seeing Luke and Yoda. A lot of the scenes between Rey and Luke, I did really enjoy. I did not enjoy the space chase. I thought that was slow. I did not enjoy Canto Bight. I did enjoy the end. I enjoyed the end of this movie.
I think the thing that's disappointing for me is the missed opportunity. You have, Disney with all the money in the world who, has an opportunity here to make movie history, and at the end of the day, people will be talking about a movie for a long time based on its quality. People aren't going to be talking about these movies for decades just because they made $2 billion.
No, I agree.
Nobody really, I don't think people really care about that in the long run.
But because this is Star Wars and this is pop culture, these movies will always be talked about.
Well, yeah, but it depends on whether they'll be talked about fondly,
Yeah.
And that's...
But look at the prequel trilogy. The prequel trilogy, I don't believe the prequel trilogy is talked about fondly. I think it is, I think you look back now and you don't have as many negative feelings about it now as you did then. I think more people, when they had that, when you first came out of those prequel trilogy films...
I think people were very judgmental.
I think people, yes, I think so too. And that's one of the reasons why George is not doing this.
Yeah.
Because George caught a lot of crap for those movies, and that's one of the reasons why he said, I don't think I can do another 10 years and take all this all over again.
Yeah.
Especially if he was putting out something that the fans were not going to like and appreciate.
Well, again, all he really had to do was give up the directing reins and just kind of stay behind the scenes and be the,
Be the storyteller, don't be the director.
Yeah, exactly. Give the person riding the ship the map where to
reins,
go.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's just it's just one of those things where Star Wars is part of movie history, and if you're in charge of doing that chapter, put your stamp on it and give it your best shot, and if it's good enough, that's decades from now the films will still be endearing, and I think the original trilogy, 40 years later, is still an endearing favorite.
The
That
problem
people predominantly love.
The problem is, and it's not so much a problem, it's just that the original trilogy set a very high bar.
Yeah.
And I don't think the prequel trilogy lived up to that bar, and I don't think the sequel trilogy is going to live up to that bar. That's reality.
May not be as good, but at least if you made it yours enough, made it unique enough, it makes it distinctive to be its conversation, as opposed to the conversation that we're having as about to how these films are not distinctive enough and they're just nostalgic copycats of everything that's gone before.
Right.
And 40 years from now, people aren't going to be, I don't know that people are going to be talking about that a lot.
Well, I think the biggest thing people will be talking about is
people should be talking about
originality.
people should be you would like to think people would be talking about how much they love the film, and this is I saw it again, haven't seen it in years and I saw it again and this is what I liked.
But you're gonna have people from all over, from different degrees that are gonna be like, what, I hated that film because it was such a copycat, or I love the film because they introduced all these new characters. You're going to have everything in between, but I mean, whereas the original trilogy, the majority of people really like and enjoy those films, it's also generational. You have a lot of kids that are maybe in like their late teens and early 20s that know the prequel trilogy, that grew up with that when they, that's what they saw in theaters when they were kids,
right.
and they love the prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
So, and you're going to have the same thing when you have young kids now going to see the sequel trilogy. This is their first experience of Star Wars. They're going to love the sequel trilogy because this is what they know.
Yeah.
And then they're going to go back and they're going to experience those other films at some point in time, and then
hopefully they'll enjoy it.
And hopefully they'll enjoy it, and that will broaden their knowledge of the whole universe.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't think anybody should be stuck in the films that are from their time period. Like,
no, I don't think so either.
Because I mean, everybody's nostalgic about the films that they saw growing up.
Especially growing up, yes.
But widen your horizons and go backwards. Because I can tell you right now, I personally have seen more films from the 80s than any other decade. I was 12 years old to 22 years old. And I've seen but lo and behold, of every single decade of film that I've watched, the 80s is my least favorite decade. but I've seen more films, and there are, granted, there are a lot of films in there that I'm very nostalgic about. But at the end of the day, almost it's my least favorite decade in the history of
film. And I think
film.
we'll get to review some of those films at some point.
Absolutely.
I think what we're going to end up doing is I think we're going to call it. I think we've talked enough about this film.
Yep, we've
and our
gone
thoughts on
over.
it. We've gone over the hour again, so we failed again, even under an hour.
We've gone even longer than the other two.
So I think one of our next discussions I think we're going to talk about is something a little bit fun. Instead of doing a movie review, I think we might talk about some of our top 10,
some of our favorite films and things like that.
And I think we even might do a discussion about the Oscars that are coming up. Might talk about some of the films and the categories that are up and being nominated.
Yeah, we could have a special Oscar episode.
Kind of talk about maybe some of our predictions where we might see that going. And hopefully those episodes will be a little bit shorter for everyone to enjoy.
We're not done with Star Wars for sure.
No.
I think when episode 9 comes out, we'll certainly do an episode 9 episode.
Absolutely, I think we'll talk about that.
We're definitely gonna have an episode where we talk about the fiasco of the 1977 Academy Awards, where Annie
That's gonna get
Hall
discussed.
beat Star Wars for Best Picture. We can talk about whether the Academy got it right. That'll be a lot of fun.
I think something that we're going to discuss throughout the. We'll sprinkle little things like that throughout the year. Some of those big franchises. The next few times we talk about movie reviews, I think we're going to do something maybe a little bit smaller scale.
Sure.
And kind of try to see if we can rope other people in from different areas, different genres, not just from superheroes and from Star Wars. All right. So I think with that, have a wonderful weekend, everyone. We're going to call it a night.
I've already finished my drink, but I have a drop left.
Everyone enjoy the rest of the night. Thank you guys so much for watching.
Thank you. See you next time.
See you next time at the movies.